Hey everybody, Tim Adams here with you again for another Hangout on Air. This time we're going to be talking with Paul Allen and Clifford about how churches can use YouTube. So, Paul, just to kind of kick things off here, I know that there's a lot of, shall we call it, disinformation and just plain ignorance about what YouTube can and cannot do in regards to churches. So maybe we can talk about some of the benefits that YouTube can provide to churches to start things off.
Yeah, YouTube is a great free service. It's really nice to be able to upload any video you want within some limits. They don't like copyrighted stuff, and that's going to come into play a little later in our discussion, I think. But the first thing that I think that a lot of churches, they just don't see all the advantages that YouTube can provide for them. Like you can keep track of videos that you've created, whether they're service videos or videos with of little elements within the church service, and share those quickly and easily. Also, if you do it right, and I want to say if you do it right is important. If you do it right, there are SEO benefits of using YouTube. So it's possible that if you list the right stuff in the description, if you put the right keywords, if you reference things like that, and even if you put it in a transcription, YouTube is, of course, owned by Google, but it's also the second largest search engine in the world after Google itself. So I don't know about you, but a lot of times if I have a question, what I'll do is I'll go to Google and I'll type in site:YouTube and then something to answer my question. So I think that that's probably something that we're seeing more and more people doing. I know my kids, they'll hop on YouTube and stay on YouTube all day long. They use it for music, they use it for entertainment, and it's just a great place for you to get the message from your church out if you do it right. And you can do it for free. So that's something that generally churches say, if it's free, it's for me. Well, YouTube is. So that's something else that you can consider.
Right. Now, I want to touch on the importance of titles and descriptions. I have seen many, many churches use YouTube, and they will simply title their, every week with the date. And maybe if they have the time, they'll put the sermon title on there. And then if they're really on top of it, they're going to put a description in there that's kind of short and sweet. So why is it important to not only use catchy descriptions and titles, but why is it important from a consistency standpoint to do that?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of churches miss out on is they'll come up with a catchy title like Adventures in Matrimony. That sounds like a good contemporary church series, Adventures in Matrimony. Well, people aren't searching for matrimony. They're searching for, I have a problem with my marriage. So a better title would be something like Marriage Help, Adventures in Matrimony Week 2, Help My Marriage Sucks, or something like that. Something where it's going to include words that people use. A lot of people think of keywords as like this mystical thing that Google knows. Just think of it this way. Google is run, it's all algorithmic, it's computers that do the work. They don't understand all the time if you're doing a pun, if you're doing a play on words, if you're doing some synonyms that are less often used that a person would understand. They wouldn't necessarily know that adventures in matrimony means marriage help. But, you know, a person, once they saw that, would go, oh yeah, that's probably it. But it's going to be so low on the list that they're never going to get to it. So that's why it's much more important that you put in a keyword-rich title. From what I'm hearing, the keyword should be towards the beginning, because the more important stuff tends to be towards the beginning. So it would be better to start out marriage help : than to do adventures in matrimony, help my marriage sucks, marriage help right on the end, you know? So those are all things to consider, because keep in mind that while Google is getting better and better at searching non-text content, they still don't have it licked. So just because your pastor says marriage help 25,000 times during the message doesn't mean that Google will necessarily make out that that's what's being said. So they might mistake that for some other word that has nothing to do with anything, and then you'll rank for something that has nothing to do with anything, and people will get mad and give you thumbs down and just say, well, this doesn't have anything to do with what I was looking for after all. You know, this is all about marriage, not something else. So,
Right. And what you're referring to is the automatic transcription service that Google and YouTube has implemented for, I believe it's every video uploaded at this point. And it works okay. It's not perfect. It's the same system that transcribes Google Voice messages. And believe me, listening to some of those versus reading the transcription can be quite entertaining. But yeah, so what we're talking about now is what's referred to as video optimization, or YouTube optimization, and that is, you know, if you're uploading a sermon or a message or a worship service, and the title of the message is fairly, well, we'll say it's lame. You know, it doesn't grab you. That's not necessarily the pastor's fault, because, you know, he's just coming up with a title, not necessarily with the intent of grabbing people from off the street necessarily. So I don't see it as a problem to, shall we say, extrapolate basically what you were saying. Take the sermon title and the content and say, okay, what's this really about? What's a message or a video title that I could put on here that is going to help me rank well and also grab people, like in your case, it's talking about marriage and how to have a better, healthier, stronger relationship. What's a title and a description that's going to help me attract people who are searching for that? So that's all video optimization. It's a very powerful tool. It does take time, but it is something that if you want to make it as easy as possible for the people online to find your video content, then that's time that you have to invest. I mean, it's just that simple. So Paul, let's kind of circle back around to this idea that YouTube is owned by Google. I think there's an important aspect here of integration of YouTube into the Google Apps family. I know Charles has indicated that he kind of stumbled onto YouTube because of that integration, because he originally was using Google Apps to handle the domain email for his church. So let's maybe touch on some high points of why integrating YouTube into Google Apps is a benefit for churches.
I'm not sure I know where you're going with this question, Tim, so I'm not going to ramble on for a long time, but I do think that there are some benefits, not just from the SEO standpoint, which is, I think, one of the biggest ones. I think that there's just YouTube is this phenomenal tool. You know, we think about Googling things to find information. Well, I keep thinking about a situation that happened to me probably 10 or 12 years ago where we were at church, and this is, I think YouTube started around 2005. I think this was a couple of years before YouTube. They were saying, man, it would be great if we could show this one commercial in church. And I said, look, I'm happy to even call the company and ask for permission to get it, maybe get a better copy of it than something we've recorded off TV. But first off, no one had a copy that had been recorded off TV. Secondly, no one could remember what the company was, which company they were advertising for. And so they really, we just couldn't use it because there was no way to get a hold of this. It was all, yeah, I remember seeing this one commercial this one time. Well, YouTube now provides us a way to get that one commercial from that one time. And I think that along with the educational benefits, it's just something that's really helpful. Now, when you throw in your church's mission to seek and save the lost and to just really help people, you can be a part of this library of information. And so I think that that's very valuable. Maybe Charles could illuminate more of the stuff that he was talking about before I take us off on this tangent.
Well,
I'm not quite sure where I'm going even.
It's okay. Just for everybody out there, Charles had essentially brought up that issue or that topic of conversation in the chat, and I kind of threw Paul a curveball, so I apologize, Paul. So, Charles, why don't you kind of pick up and kind of give us a little more background on what you were thinking?
Yeah, so I guess kind of go back a little history lesson. Initially, and Paul can correct me if I get some of this history wrong, we started doing stuff on YouTube about 2.5 years ago. And I believe back at that time, unless you had like a paid YouTube account, or if you had, should I say, a good reputation on YouTube where they gave you some fringe benefits, I want to say the recording time was like limited. I don't remember what that limit was, but each video could only be so many minutes long. Paul's putting in the chat it was about 20 minutes. And as you're probably well aware, most of your sermons from a pastor are about a half hour on average. Just, once again, depends on the church if you're just uploading the sermon. So we were wanting to upload our sermons and record videos, but we were like, a free YouTube account isn't enough. It won't get us there. And we had this other, and I'm going to kind of go off on a tangent here, we had this other need from a marketing or advertising perspective, like take Vacation Bible School, for example. We wanted to put Vacation Bible School marketing materials out there, posters, banners, things like that, and put an email address and a phone number for people to contact. But you don't want to go putting somebody's personal email address or personal phone number on a poster, right? So I found out, like Google Apps, if you're a church and you can turn over to Google all your nonprofit documentation from the government, which is a whole long story I won't go down into, that Google will give you a full-blown apps account for free, which is normally a business entitlement. You have to pay for it. But if you prove that you're a nonprofit, and churches are, then you get a Google Apps account for free. Well, out of that, the two main benefits we got out of that was, of course, getting email addresses for our domain name for free through a Google account. So we created an account called VBS at, ourwebsite.com. And I went in and configured that to redirect any emails that come to that email address to who led VBS. So you're protecting that person's email address. And then when VBS is over, kill that email address. Then you've got Google Voice, where you can create basically a phone number that's a voice over IP phone number. Same thing there. Created a Google Voice number, redirected it to the VBS director's cell phone. When VBS is over with, kill the number. Well, in the process of doing all that, then we realized, wait a minute, Now that we've got Google Apps, we can go post videos on YouTube with unlimited length. And that's what got us into YouTube. So having a Google Apps account for nonprofits, it's a lot of work to get set up, but once you get it set up, there's a lot of benefits. And one of those things used to be unlimited video times on YouTube. I know they've changed their restrictions since then, and it's more wide open, where that's not as much of a necessity now, but it's still worth looking into.
Excellent. Thanks, Charles. Now we're going to circle back around to video optimization. Sorry for bouncing around, everybody. Charles, you had kind of asked the question about what is most important in terms of searches. What's going to provide a better kind of use of time? Is it the tags that you put on the individual videos? Is it the title? Is it the description? And Paul, this may be getting a little technical, but my opinion is that it all works together. What do you think?
Well, I think that you're right. It all works together. I think that the title is really important. So before you even upload your video to YouTube, you probably want to change the name from MVI_0659.move or whatever it's called to something that is helpful. So before you even upload, do that. And like I say, look for keywords, because these are the synonyms that people are actually looking for. So that's your friend. You know, it's better that someone is typing for marriage help and they actually get marriage help than they type for marriage help and they get something that it could go either way. So I think that that's helpful. I think it's also helpful that it's in the description. It's also helpful if it's in a transcription. That's something not a lot of people do because it's a lot of extra work. The tags, I think, is also helpful, but you can also overdo that. You can have 50,000 tags and it gets a little unruly. So you want to be a little bit more staid with that if you can. Try and not go crazy with it. But that's, in general, that's what I do. A couple of tricks that I've seen people do is there's a plugin for Chrome called vidIQ. It's something that I found when I was taking a video class through Udemy on YouTube. And it's basically, there's a free version, and that's all you need. And that in Chrome, when you're on YouTube, it shows you the tags on the particular video. So if you think, well, this video is a lot like the one from this other church that's more popular, you could use similar tags, similar keywords, and maybe show up in that list of videos along the side. So if someone doesn't get what they want from the video they find easily, they can go, oh, well, here's another one and it's on the same thing. Well, maybe that'll help me. And they watch your video, and that's just a little sneakiness to help around. Nothing wrong with it unless you're lying. And I don't want you to lie, you know, say, oh, yes, this is totally about marriage when it's not. You know, don't do that. But if it is, look at what people that are having more success are doing and emulate them. And then you'll likely have more success. You might not get 1 million views every time, but you'll probably get, you know, 30 or 40. And if your church is on average 200 people, well, that's a big bump in viewership, in attendance, really, if you want to think of it that way. Over 200, that you're almost to another 50% of people, maybe another 30%.
Yeah,
now,
and
math wrong, but you know what I mean.
yeah. I think Betty brings up an interesting point, and that is the recommended videos or the videos that come up after your video is done, I think is largely based on the keywords and the tags that you use for your video. And so if you're not doing that, if you're not monitoring that, let's put it that way, then you could get some, shall we say, questionable content that comes up at the end of your videos or even off to the side, because YouTube, or let's be honest, Google's algorithm thinks that this other content is related when it's not. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, I think we've reached a point in the discussion where we need to discuss and talk about the motivation behind using YouTube and just online video in general. Because as I see it, there's really two schools of thought. One is we're going to put our content up so that our members and people who like to stay connected to our church have a way online that they can consume that content, they can view that video content on their schedule, right? The other school of thought is we're going to use this as an evangelism tool that we are going to try and actively pull people into our church by attracting them with this video content. Those are kind of the two primary modes of utilizing or motivations, let's say, of using video in regards to a church. Charles, and Paul, feel free to chime in. I'm just kind of opening it up here. Do you guys agree? Do you guys think that I'm missing something? Another motivation, maybe? How about I direct? Paul?
Okay. Yeah, I think that those are both good methods. I guess part of it is my church is very evangelistic, so I jump there first. And there's nothing wrong with also having, video from Vacation Bible School that the parents can access and say, "Oh, that's so cute! Look at little Johnny doing that cute thing while I was at work," or while I was actually enjoying some free time to myself for a change. I think that that's perfectly fine. My younger daughter, who's 8, just went to our church's children's camp for the first time. And we just took great delight in seeing all the photographs that they had a volunteer there that's a professional photographer, and she was taking photographs like crazy, and it was just so fun to see. Oh, look, she's shooting a Red Ryder BB gun. She better not shoot her eye out. And she actually was, so it was really funny. And she didn't shoot her eye out, which made it still funny. So I think that that's a good use of things to inform the congregation, to share events that people can't be at all the time. And there is an outreach aspect to that, because if you show these fun things that your children's ministry is doing, and it kind of, like Betty is saying in the chat, tells a story, and the story isn't Christians are boring and sit at home with their hands folded and their 3,000-pound King James Bibles open in their laps all the time, and that's all they do. That's going to surprise some people. And so it could have a secondary evangelistic outreach kind of field, just because people would be surprised that we don't think that God is against fun. It's just some things are more harmful to you, and that's why God doesn't want you to do those things. So I think that might be useful in that way.
Charles, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, sorry if I repeat a few things since I stepped away for a second, but primarily our focus at church is probably the twofold things that you mentioned. One is, making sure members can keep up when they miss out, and two, reaching out to the public. But I will say the reaching out to the public thing is where we're probably weak. You know, if you just have, like in our case, your sermon videos or the title of the sermon with the date, you know, it's not really grabbing people for that purpose. But where we do utilize YouTube to kind of reach out to the public is we did record kind of our promotional video, kind of introducing our pastor to the public, because we share a pastor between three churches. So that is like the welcome video on our YouTube channel. And it's also a video that's on the homepage on at least 2 out of the 3 of our church websites. The third one, the other church, for whatever reason, decided not to put it up. But we do that, and then like when we do Vacation Bible School, yeah, we post all of our pictures to Facebook, but we also, at the end of VBS, roll those pictures into a slideshow with music and put that on YouTube. So we're trying to reach people from both fronts as far as that, posting pictures to Facebook and posting videos to YouTube. And a slight kind of squirrel comment here, as far as, you know, uploading videos with copyrighted music. I know on YouTube that used to be a big problem back in the past. But in the last 2 years, YouTube has gotten a little, I guess you could say, lax on it, so to speak. So like when we post our video slideshows of VBS, it's got copyrighted music in it. And what YouTube tends to do now, used to, they block the video, they pull it, you know, all sorts of nastiness. But now they just kind of give you a little warning. It doesn't affect your status on YouTube, but it's a little warning saying, hey, this has got copyrighted material. When somebody watches this, they're going to see a pop-up ad at the bottom of their screen. And, you know, some churches, you may not consider that a worthy compromise because you never know what kind of ad's going to pop up. But, you know, as long as you don't have that worry, that might be an acceptable compromise for you, you know, when it comes to copyrighted content. But there are horrors with copyrighted content in YouTube and live streaming. But I will stop there because that's something Paul's probably going to focus on here later, so I don't want to steal his thunder.
Yeah, Paul was all over the chat. Let me talk about that. So go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so I've just recently discovered this, and I've got mixed feelings about it because there are some downsides to it, but it is something for you to consider, that if you're in your creator studio on YouTube and you go under that to audio library, there's free music, which is royalty-free music that you can use just to your heart's content. So if you need something kind of instrumental behind a slideshow, the song doesn't matter, it just can't be silent, that might be a good way to go. I use at least a couple of the songs that are the theme songs of my shows are from that section. And so I just don't have any copyright problems because they have created those or contracted with them to do it. And Tim's actually showing this on screen. So the other one that I wanted to talk about that I'm really excited about is ad-supported music. So click on ad-supported music for me, Tim. And originally, when I first saw this, I didn't recognize any of the bands. But let's see if there's anything. Okay, halfway down, Maroon 5. You've probably heard of them, even if it's not a group that you would personally listen to. I did a search. I found Taylor Swift, Shake It Off. I found there's Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nae Nae, which is a recent song that a lot of the kids like. You know, things like that. And so since they're in this area, you can kind of know that it'll be ad-supported. You're not going to make money from any of the views on your video, but you're not running afoul of copyright either. So this is something I didn't know when I started the series that I'm doing on one of my shows about YouTube, but I looked it up and I'm pleasantly surprised that, you know, you could have your entire church staff do a lip sync of Shake It Off, and that's not going to be pulled down. You're not going to get in trouble. the record company isn't going to knock on your door and sue you for hundreds of thousands of dollars because you did this evil thing. No, you can do that. And I'm not saying that all those songs you would use, but you have some freedom there that you didn't before, because YouTube, realizing that a lot of the times people want to do these things, has made deals with the record company, and the record companies, they only want money. So, you know, if there's a way for them to make more money, they're all in favor of that. And it's so much easier than suing someone and maybe the judge throws it out because they're like, it's just one guy on YouTube. What damage is that doing to you, you know? And then they're eating a bunch of attorney's fees, or they sue someone that doesn't have any money anyway and they never make anything. So I think it's kind of a win-win. The downside is, one, you don't know what the commercials are going to be, so it could be something. YouTube doesn't tend to put on, like, you know, ads for this is where you can find a lover to cheat on your husband or wife, that kind of site. They don't tend to do that, but they might put up a car commercial on a weekend when your pastor is talking about living with less, and it's a Mercedes-Benz commercial. Not offensive, but not exactly what you're trying to go for either. So it could be that you run into issues like that. I think that I'm really excited about this, really just from the standpoint of removing barriers to do things that a lot of people think that they can do, but they can't. And now you can, at the cost of the advertising. And one other cost, which I noticed, a lot of these songs are not licensed for Germany. If you're in the US, that might not bug you at all that you can't show your videos in Germany. But if your church has a partnership with the German congregation and you send missionaries over there all the time or something like that, that might bug you. So that's something else to keep in mind. Look at the restrictions. I think before I made anything with any music, I would do a search here, and there is Christian music in there. So I would do a search, see if it's in there, and not feel bad at all if it's listed, and basically I can say to YouTube, yes, I'm going to use this ad-supported music, and I'm okay with you putting ads on it, and everybody's happy.
Charles? Oh,
Well,
sorry.
well,
You said skip you.
yeah, I was going to say Paul pretty much covered it there in the end. I know, a lot of people might view, putting copyrighted issue music up as still a moral issue, but kind of where I come from is, as long as the worker's getting his wages in somewhere or another, then that's what matters. So one thing I don't know if Paul focused on in that talk about, having the ad-supported music. Yes, he talked about the outside the U.S. restrictions, which is something to be thinking about. I forgot to mention. But the other thing about that, and it just went out my ear. I forgot it. That's what I get for monologuing. It just, oh.
Well, if it comes back, let me know.
Yeah, if it comes back, I'll let you know. But there was another little gotcha about copyrighted music that you wanted to be aware of, but it wasn't a bad thing. It'll come back to me later. Sorry.
All right, no worries. So, Paul, let's kind of segue into YouTube streaming, because I know that that's something that a lot of smaller churches and even some medium churches kind of look at, and they say, well, it's free, and we can. It almost seems to me like there's some kind of workaround or jerry-rigging going on just to get it to work. And I've seen it work. The lighting gig that I do every May, this past May, we used YouTube Live in conjunction with the Teradek video, and it worked pretty well. So I'm kind of curious, what's your experience? What are some pitfalls to look out for? What are the pros, cons, that kind of thing?
Well, there are a couple of pitfalls that I've run into. First off, it seems like this was not built with the same time every week event in mind. So I think that they built it with, you'll do the Super Bowl, or you'll do a presidential debate. You know, kind of these rare events that, you know, getting a new embed code, putting that on the website, that's not a big deal because you do this once a month, once every 6 months, once a year. You know, no big deal. But churches tend to have church at least once a week. Some have it more often. So you could envision that that's going to be a little difficult if you don't have a universal embed code. Now there is a WordPress plugin that'll get around this, or you can kind of create a playlist and embed the playlist and make sure that it's in the playlist, but it's not as easy as it could be. And I've run into issues with, there are a few kind of odd things about it, like if you schedule something out of order, sometimes it doesn't like that, things like that. Those are kind of the technical problems that I see. The other problems that I see, though, are it comes down to the fact that Google in general does not want a call center full of people to answer questions. They want it done by a Python script. They want it automatic. If you have a question, they want a FAQ, frequently asked questions, that helps, and that's it. So for 80–90% of the situations, that works beautifully. But churches are not 80–90% of the situations because it comes back to the copyright. So let's say you're thinking, well, our church is perfectly safe because we only do hymns. That's not actually true because of Mickey Mouse, which is going to sound strange, so let me explain. Steamboat Willie was the first sound cartoon created back in the early 20s, and the Disney Corporation copyrighted that, and then every time it's gotten close to expiration, they've gone to Congress and had copyright extended. So now it's the case that anything made in the 1920s or earlier is, there's a good chance it's under copyright. So not everything though. So there are some hymns that you would think are not under copyright that are, and then there are others that you would think, oh yeah, that one definitely is, that isn't. So it's very confusing. You've got to look up, check in the hymnal, see when the copyright date is, maybe look up if that's still under copyright. There are some that are expiring like 2016, and it's all kinds of crazy. If you're doing contemporary music that you didn't write, oh yeah, you're going to have problems. The way around that, of course, is the CCLI streaming license or the Christian Copyright Association license, which you can get. Those are very helpful, but YouTube has no way of saying, hey, I'm good, here's my license to prove that I'm good until such and such a date, then check back with me. They don't have that. And there's no one you can call and say, hey, yeah, I've got the CCLI license. Yeah, just white flag my account. Yeah, no problem. So I hear horror stories all the time about churches that have the appropriate licenses, so they're doing everything legally. The artists are being paid, the record company is being paid, everybody's being paid, but then they put it up on YouTube and YouTube says, ah, this is illegal, and they yank your content and put a flag against your channel. And when you have 5 people that watch your videos, that's not a big deal. But when you have 1,000 people that watch your videos, and then all of a sudden you've done it one too many times and they kill your account, that's a huge problem, especially because you were legal. That's the problem. And there's no one to talk to say, no, we're legal, everything should be okay, but it's not. So I think that it's really a customer service issue. It's not that we're trying to skirt the law. It's that, like Daniel, who has been on these Hangouts before, he's up in Canada. He actually had his live stream pulled during a Sunday service and wasn't able to get back on. So they had to go with a different way, even though they were perfectly legal. They had all the appropriate licensing and everything, but there was no one to talk to. So that's kind of the problem that I see with all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. You know, it's like you said so perfectly. You know, they just want to have a script that handles it all and automates it because they have no interest in having a call center, you know, to support things like this. And what I was kind of saying over in the chat is that, you know, unlike livestream.com or some other streaming host, YouTube was not built as a streaming platform. It was built primarily as a video on demand platform. And it almost feels like, you know, live streaming is this add-on to their playback engine. And, you know, like you said, it's not designed for recurring events every week. It's really designed for one-offs, is what we call them. And, you know, even there are issues. You know, you really got to know what you're doing. And, you know, like you said, there's nobody that you can call up because there's nobody there. You know, there's no phone number to call. There's no way to get past the gatekeeper, as we call it, that is the receptionist, you know, one of, I don't know how many hundreds of receptionists that Google employs. You know, there's just nobody to talk to. I remember years ago, I tried to contact Google, or I tried to contact YouTube in regards to a video that had popped up as a suggest or recommended video to a 7-year-old girl that was completely inappropriate for somebody that age. And I didn't get anywhere because there's nobody to talk to. So, yeah, I mean, YouTube, it's a great tool, but it's not always going to be the right tool for you. And I think hopefully, you know, this last 40 minutes or so has kind of brought up some interesting topics that at least you can use as a basis for discussion at your local church. Now, Charles had an interesting thought. His brain kind of rebooted, and he got his thoughts back. So, and it's a very interesting point, and it's not one that I've actually ever heard anybody talk about. So, Charles, why don't you, going back to music and copyright and all that, why don't you go back over that point that you put over in the chat?
Okay, so like take for example, you know, we do our BBS recap video that has copyrighted music. It plays an ad, the worker gets paid, everybody's happy, right? That works well in our case. But let's say you are doing a promotional video to try to raise money for a mission trip, and those funds may come from outside sources. And you may want to monetize your promotional video for your mission trip on YouTube. Well, if you put copyrighted music in your promo video, when that little algorithm runs and says, hey, you got copyrighted music, I'm going to play an ad for you, then it disables the monetization on that video. So if you have ambitions of creating a video and trying to earn money on it, you definitely want to avoid copyrighted material.
Excellent. I thought that was a good point for y'all. So there you go. Now here's another. Now I'm gonna have a brain fart. Can't remember what I was gonna say. Oh, that's right. That's right. All right. So essentially, I like how you put it, Charles, and that is, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You get what you pay for. The fact that YouTube is free means that there's going to be some pitfalls. There's going to be some pretty significant downsides to utilizing it. But there are significant benefits as well. I think we can probably all agree that if you're going to include YouTube in your online video strategy, be that video on demand or be that YouTube Live, that you have a solid understanding of exactly what you're using it for, what are your motivations behind using online video, and then understanding what the pitfalls are and being able to not work around them, but work with them, if that makes sense. I don't know, are we all in agreement on that? Yes, I'm getting nodding. Okay. Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say, just in light of this, Charles mentions that it's kind of an outside-the-box thought of monetizing your YouTube videos. There is not a lot of money in YouTube video monetization. I have 720 videos on YouTube. Okay, so that's a lot. Even if each one gets 20 views a month, that would be a lot of views. And they don't. But even with 720 videos on YouTube, if there's something on Church Check, there's a good chance my video is somehow going to show up in the list. So right now I am making pizza money from it. So it's not retirement money. It's basically, I've got a freelance gig in town that I do a lot, and in 2 hours I can make what I make uploading 4 videos a week, every week, to YouTube all month long. So there are much more effective ways to make money. You know, you're making a nickel here, a dime there. You know, at the end of the month, you've made $10, $30, something like that. You know, not enough to justify the effort of monetizing, the effort of making the video. So I don't think, unless you've got the next Freddie bit my finger, or the pastor's 18-year-old just got his wisdom teeth out and was hilarious on the anesthesia. Unless you've got something like that, you're probably not going to make enough to justify uploading it. Unless it goes viral, it's not going to be thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It might be tens of dollars if you're lucky. So just keep that in mind if you think that YouTube monetization is the answer to all your problems.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, you're only really going to be making money if you've got, I would say, 10,000 subscribers or more, because at that point, then you've got some volume. You've got a fair amount of traffic that is actually shown that they're interested in what you're producing. So Betty over in the chat is like, okay, so sum up. What is the #1 way churches should use YouTube? And I guess for me to answer that question, I would say that I don't see a downside to using YouTube for an on-demand playback system, with the understanding that you could potentially, if you're uploading the entire worship service, or even if you're just doing the Bible message and there is copywritten music in there, you could potentially have issues. Not promising you will, definitely not promising that you won't, but that is a potential issue right there. Are you using it as a marketing tool? Are you using it just to help people keep in touch? I don't know. That's really up to you. I think it's a viable option, but again, as long as you understand the pros and the cons and how to use it most effectively. Charles, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it goes back to those top two things. The top two things probably for YouTube is, archive video and outreach. But outreach, just, sticking your video on YouTube and going, there it is, and expect miracles, that's not necessarily going to happen. It takes a lot more elbow work to achieve the outreach aspect. So at least what I see from a YouTube perspective in churches, it's mainly for archive video. If I was to give it a number one, that would be the number one.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to have the embeddability. That's something that's really nice. So you can upload it to YouTube. If people stumble on it, that's great. But it's nice that you can then take that video, embed it on your church website, and people that you know are interested, people from your church, can watch it at any time. So that's nice. The live video, I really don't think that any of the Christian live streaming companies have anything to worry about it, because their customer service is going to be, like, even the worst of them is going to have better customer service than Google does with their YouTube streaming service, because they're probably going to get back to you within a month. Even if they're really bad at customer service, they're probably going to get back to you within a month. Google will never get back to you. I mean, not yet. Maybe someday they will figure this out, create virtual people that can make decisions. I don't know what they're working on. But as of today, the
Did we lose him?
Yeah, his bandwidth may have cut out. It was starting to get bad.
Yeah, it was. Well, at this point, I'll just pick up where he left off. Google's not going to get back to you. And you can't count on that kind of support. And so, is it the best live stream host? Definitely not. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I think that's probably where Paul was going to be going. Places like Three Angels Live or livestream.com, places like that have built for the purpose solutions are going to be your best bet for providing live stream services. But as far as an archive for online, I think it's, the consensus of this group that there's nothing wrong with using YouTube, again, as long as you understand the potential issues involved. Charles?
Yeah, to kind of segue off of that, another reason to kind of why I say archiving is kind of the number one purpose for YouTube. A lot of these streaming providers for your live streaming of your services, like Livestream, Ustream, Church, I don't know, all the different ones that are out there, they have the capability for you to archive your videos there. But let's look at it back from the outreach side. If you're going to try to do outreach and hope somebody happens across your video, which do you think is going to happen more likely? Are they going to find your archive video on livestream.com or on YouTube? So it sounds like a little bit of a lot. Well, it's actually kind of a lot more work depending on your workflow process. But, a lot of people, they'll say, oh, we'll get live streaming services from Ustream, and then once it's recorded, we're done. We don't have to touch it. Well, if you want your stuff to really be found, you got to put in that extra legwork, which in our case, I do that. Every week after our sermon is recorded, I log into ustream.com, download the video, chop off the beginning and the end to make it, just the sermon and not the little fringy stuff on the edge, and then put it up on YouTube. So, if you're thinking of doing archive video and trying to save yourself some work and just leaving it on a live streaming host, you're really kind of making your videos hard to find.
Well, and let's also not forget the importance of being able to embed. YouTube's great. Nothing wrong with that. However, the ability to create a playlist and embed that playlist back on your church's website is huge. because that's one code you have to embed one time, and then every time you add a video to that playlist, it automatically updates on the website, which means people don't have to go to YouTube to find or to play the video content if they're already on your website. You can keep them on your website, which is that's a pretty important thing to do. You know, I'm coming at that from the business side, but it's just as important for churches. So, and yeah, okay, Charles, you're reminding me, yes, YouTube is the #2 search engine in the world. And so, you know, while, yes, live stream does have embedding capability, what it doesn't have is that built-in integration into the search engine algorithm that YouTube does. And I mean, let's be honest, Google is and probably will be for some time to come the #1 search engine in the world. And so why not have that integration work for you rather than you working against it? Those are my thoughts. Anybody have anything final to say before we wrap this up? Paul is back with us.
I am. All great points, and I think what I would do is I wouldn't depend on YouTube solely, but I would absolutely upload the video. When I started uploading my videos, I was thinking, hey, I'm a video podcaster, I'm an audio podcaster, but since I've got videos, I'll just upload them to YouTube. Well, it turns out I've got a bigger following on YouTube than I have these other places. So somehow I've become a YouTuber and not as much a video podcaster. So I think that it's possible that you can develop a following there just by thinking, well, why not? Doesn't hurt. I'll just upload this and let it get the stuff, and I'll copy and paste the description. And it's a great strategy. And I think that I've talked to a lot of churches that say, well, the reason we're going to use YouTube for live streaming isn't that we can't afford something better, it's that YouTube is going to get me all the Google juice in the world, so I have to use them. Well, I don't think you're going to get that much more by live streaming than you are by uploading the video when it's done that doesn't have the copyright issues, because you're only uploading the sermon. And it's not going to be the case that you have to kind of guess when the sermon starts, and so you don't even start live streaming until Saturday or Sunday morning, whenever your church service is, at 11:30 when church started at 11. Oh, actually, we're just finishing the anthem at 11:30. Ooh, we still have the copyright issues. Or, well, the upfront part of the message went, or the upfront part of the service went a little shorter than we anticipated, and we've cut off the first half of the pastor's talk. I mean, we started it, but no one was there until 11:30 because we've trained them. So I think that that's stuff to consider, and I don't think that it's, I don't think you get all that much extra Google juice from, as compared to the problems that it creates, until they get this customer service stuff ironed out.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up nice and tight and say, well, nothing much to wrap up, honestly. You did a great job. So I just want to thank everybody for watching, those of you who watch this live, and those of you who watch this on demand. And keep us in mind on Google Plus in the Church Tech community, and that's where most of us are. We're also in other Church Tech communities, but Church Tech is the main one. I believe that the next topic that we're going to cover is we're going to revisit our discussion from a few months ago in regards to audio mixers, digital versus analog. There's been a fair amount of interest in that of late, and some pretty exciting new technology has been coming out over the last few months. So, as always, if you want to be involved in future Hangouts, or if you have a thought, maybe we're wrong, you know, if you have an opinion that differs from us, or if you'd like to comment, please do so. Like this video, subscribe, or comment below. And until next time, God bless.